In the heart of New York City, where towering skyscrapers kissed the clouds and luxury cars lined the streets, lived a man named Charles Whitmore. He was no ordinary man. He was one of the wealthiest people in the city, a billionaire who had built his empire from scratch. His success story was legendary. Starting with nothing but determination and grit, he climbed to the top of the business world through sheer hard work and smart decisions. But beneath all the glamour and wealth lay a life that wasn't as perfect as it seemed. Charles raised his teenage son Ethan alone after losing his wife years ago. Ethan was born with cerebral palsy, a condition that affected his ability to walk and speak clearly. Because of this, Ethan relied on a wheelchair to get around and often struggled to communicate verbally. Despite these challenges, Ethan had a kind soul and a curious mind. However, Charles's love for his son came with a heavy dose of overprotection. He shielded Ethan from anything that might cause him discomfort or draw unwanted attention. In Charles's eyes, the world outside their gated estate was harsh and unforgiving, and he believed it was his duty to protect Ethan from its cruelties. Their days followed a predictable routine. Charles would wake up early, attend meetings at his office, and return home just in time for dinner with Ethan. On weekends, they spent most of their time indoors, watching movies or playing board games. While Charles cherished these moments with his son, there was always an underlying tension, a fear that letting Ethan experience too much of the outside world would expose him to judgment or danger. This mindset created a bubble around them, isolating them from the rest of society. One evening, however, things took a slight turn. It was Ethan's birthday, and Charles decided to do something special. Instead of staying home like usual, he booked a table at an upscale restaurant downtown. The place was known for its exquisite food, elegant decor, and impeccable service. As they entered the restaurant, heads turned, not because of Ethan's wheelchair, but because everyone recognized Charles Whitmore, the billionaire tycoon. Waiters greeted them warmly, leading them to a private corner table adorned with fresh flowers and candles. Ethan looked around curiously, taking in the soft glow of chandeliers and the gentle hum of conversation. For once, he seemed excited about being somewhere new. Charles felt a flicker of pride seeing his son so engaged. But as the night wore on, reality began to creep back in. The staff, though polite, treated Ethan with cautious distance, almost as if they were afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. They placed menus in front of both father and son, even though Ethan couldn't read them easily due to his difficulty focusing on text. When it came time to order, Charles did most of the talking, answering questions on Ethan's behalf. At one point, Ethan became restless, fidgeting in his chair and making small noises. Charles leaned closer, trying to figure out what his son wanted. Was he uncomfortable? Did he need something? The uncertainty made Charles tense. He hated feeling helpless, especially when it came to Ethan. Just as he was about to signal for the check, a young woman approached their table. She was tall and graceful, with warm brown skin and a bright smile. Her name tag read Maya, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence that immediately set her apart from the other waitstaff. "Hi there," Maya said softly, addressing Ethan directly. "Is everything okay?" Her voice was calm and inviting, completely free of pity or awkwardness. Ethan stopped fidgeting and looked up at her, his eyes wide with curiosity. Maya knelt down beside him, meeting him at eye level. "You seem like you've got something to say. Can I help?" Charles watched in silence, unsure of what to expect. No one had ever spoken to Ethan quite like this before, at least not in public. People usually tiptoed around him, treating him as if he were fragile or incapable of understanding. But Maya didn't treat him that way. She spoke to him as if he were any other person, deserving of respect and kindness. After a moment, Ethan pointed toward the far end of the restaurant, where a small dance floor had been set up near the bar. Couples were swaying gently to the sound of live jazz music, their movements fluid and unhurried. Maya followed Ethan's gaze and smiled. "Oh, you want to dance?" she asked, her tone light and encouraging. Without waiting for a response, she glanced at Charles. "Would it be all right if I took him for a spin?" Charles hesitated. The idea of letting a stranger wheel his son onto a dance floor filled him with unease. What if someone stared? What if Ethan got hurt or embarrassed? But before he could protest, Maya had already begun pushing Ethan's wheelchair toward the dance area. For a brief second, Charles considered stopping her, yet something held him back, a mix of curiosity and guilt. Deep down, he wondered if, maybe, just maybe, this was exactly what Ethan needed. As Maya positioned Ethan in the middle of the dance floor, she stepped back and extended her hand. Though Ethan couldn't stand, she guided his arms as if they were leading the dance. Slowly, she moved around him, matching her steps to the rhythm of the music. To everyone's astonishment, Ethan started laughing, a pure, joyful sound that echoed through the room. For the first time in years, he looked truly happy, as if the weight of the world had lifted off his shoulders. Charles remained frozen in his seat, torn between emotions. Pride surged within him as he watched his son laugh and enjoy himself. At the same time, guilt gnawed at him. How many opportunities like this had he denied Ethan over the years? How many times had he let his fears dictate their lives? As the music played on, Charles realized that this seemingly simple act of kindness had opened his eyes to a truth he had long ignored. Ethan wasn't just a boy with disabilities. He was a person with dreams, desires, and a spirit that yearned to soar. And perhaps it was time for Charles to let him fly. As Ethan laughed on the dance floor, his wheelchair gliding smoothly across the polished wood as Maya guided him with grace and care, the entire restaurant seemed to pause. Conversations dipped into whispers, forks clinked softly against plates, and even the musicians playing the jazz tune slowed their tempo slightly, allowing the moment to breathe. It was as if the universe itself had taken notice of what was happening. A boy in a wheelchair, once confined by invisible barriers, now leading a dance with confidence and joy. Charles sat at his table, his hands gripping the edge of his chair, tightly. He couldn't look away. Every laugh that escaped Ethan's lips felt like a revelation, piercing through years of doubt and fear that Charles had carried as a father. The sight of his son smiling so freely made Charles's chest ache, not with sadness but with something deeper, more profound. It was pride mixed with regret, happiness laced with guilt. For the first time, he saw Ethan not as someone who needed constant protection, but as a young man capable of experiencing life fully, if only given the chance. Maya moved around Ethan, with effortless elegance, her movements fluid yet deliberate. She didn't hesitate or second-guess herself. Instead, she radiated calm assurance, treating Ethan as an equal partner in the dance. At one point, she leaned down close to him and whispered something that no one else could hear. Whatever it was, it made Ethan's face light up even more, his laughter ringing out louder than before. People nearby began to smile, some even clapping gently along with the music. A few diners pulled out their phones to capture the moment, though Maya seemed completely unfazed by the attention. Her focus remained solely on Ethan, ensuring he felt safe, valued, and included. When the song finally ended, Maya wheeled Ethan back to the table where Charles still sat, frozen in thought. As they approached, Ethan reached out toward his father, his expression animated and full of excitement. It was clear he wanted to share this experience, to show Charles how incredible it had been. Maya stopped the wheelchair beside Charles and stood there quietly waiting for him to say something. For a long moment, Charles didn't speak. His mind raced with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he wanted to thank Maya for giving Ethan such a magical moment. On the other hand, he felt overwhelmed by the realization of how much he had underestimated his own son. Finally, after clearing his throat awkwardly, Charles managed to stammer, "Thank you, Ing, for doing that." Maya smiled warmly, brushing off his gratitude with a small wave of her hand. "It wasn't anything special," she said simply. "Ethan just needed someone to believe in him, that's all." Her words struck a chord deep within Charles. Believe in him. How many times had Charles failed to do exactly that? He had always loved Ethan fiercely, but love alone wasn't enough. Love without trust, without faith in Ethan's abilities, had created walls instead of bridges. And now, here was Maya, a complete stranger, showing Charles what true belief looked like. Curious about the woman who had so effortlessly changed the course of their evening, Charles asked hesitantly, "Do you do this often? Help people like Ethan?" Maya chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Not really. I work here as a waitress, but dancing is my passion. I teach kids at a community center in Brooklyn when I'm not working. Kids from all walks of life, some with disabilities, some without. Dancing gives them a way to express themselves, to feel strong and confident. It's amazing what happens when you let people shine." Brooklyn. The word echoed in Charles's mind. He knew Brooklyn well. It was a world apart from the polished, high-end lifestyle he led in Manhattan. Growing up poor himself, Charles had clawed his way out of hardship, determined never to return to those roots. But hearing Maya talk about teaching dance to underprivileged children stirred something inside him. There was a sincerity in her voice, a sense of purpose that went beyond money or status. It reminded him of who he used to be before wealth and power consumed his identity. Their conversation continued as dessert arrived, the atmosphere growing less formal and more relaxed. Maya shared snippets of her life, how she grew up in a cramped apartment with 4 siblings, how her parents worked multiple jobs just to make ends meet, and how dance became her escape from the struggles of everyday life. She spoke openly about facing discrimination because of her race and how she learned to rise above it by focusing on her dreams. Each story painted a picture of resilience and hope, qualities Charles admired deeply but rarely encountered in his insulated world. Meanwhile, Ethan kept reaching for Maya's hand, clearly reluctant to let her leave. Charles noticed this and felt a pang of jealousy, not because he disliked Maya, but because he realized how starved Ethan was for connection outside their small family unit. In protecting Ethan, Charles had inadvertently isolated him from forming relationships with others. Seeing Ethan bond so naturally with Maya made Charles wonder, what else had he missed? What other opportunities for growth and friendship had slipped through his fingers? By the end of the meal, Charles found himself feeling both inspired and unsettled. Inspired because Maya's kindness and optimism gave him a glimpse of a brighter future for Ethan. Unsettled because he recognized how much work lay ahead, not just in changing Ethan's life, but in changing his own mindset. Before leaving the restaurant, Charles handed Maya his business card, surprising even himself with the gesture. "If you ever need anything," he trailed off, unsure of how to finish the sentence. Maya accepted the card with a polite nod, though her expression suggested she wasn't particularly impressed by the billionaire's offer. "I appreciate it," she said kindly. "But honestly, Mr. Whitmore, your son doesn't need anything from me. He needs you to see him for who he really is." Those words lingered in Charles's mind long after they left the restaurant. As he drove Ethan home, the city lights blurring past the car windows, Charles replayed the night over and over again in his head. Maya's actions had been simple, a dance, a few kind words, but their impact was monumental. They forced Charles to confront uncomfortable truths about himself and the choices he had made as a father. That night, as Ethan drifted off to sleep, Charles sat alone in his study, staring at the business card he had given Maya. On its surface, it represented wealth and influence, symbols of everything Charles had spent his life building. But tonight, it felt hollow, meaningless compared to the lesson Maya had taught him. That true value lies not in what you own, but in how you treat others and yourself. The days following the dinner at the upscale restaurant were unlike any Charles Whitmore had experienced before. For years, he had prided himself on being a man of action, a problem solver who could tackle anything with precision and strategy. But now, as he replayed Maya's words in his mind, "Your son doesn't need anything from me. He needs you to see him for who he really is." Charles felt an unfamiliar sense of helplessness. It wasn't the kind of helplessness that came from failing to close a business deal or losing control over a situation. It was deeper, more personal. It stemmed from realizing how much he had failed to truly see Ethan, not just as a child with disabilities, but as a young man with dreams, desires, and untapped potential. Driven by a mix of guilt and curiosity, Charles decided to learn more about Maya and the world she spoke so passionately about. One afternoon, while Ethan was napping, Charles drove to Brooklyn, navigating streets lined with colorful murals and bustling markets. The contrast between this vibrant neighborhood and his polished Manhattan penthouse couldn't have been starker. Yet there was something undeniably alive about the place, a sense of community and resilience that Charles hadn't felt in years. He arrived at the community center where Maya taught dance. From the outside, it looked modest, a brick building with peeling paint and a small sign that read Brooklyn Dreams Dance Studio. Inside, however, the energy was electric. Children of all ages, shapes, and abilities filled the space, their laughter echoing off the walls. Some practiced ballet poses near the mirrors, while others moved rhythmically to hip-hop beats blasting from a stereo. In one corner, a group of kids in wheelchairs practiced synchronized movements, their faces glowing with determination. Charles stood quietly by the door, hesitant to intrude. He spotted Maya across the room, guiding a young girl through a series of steps. Her patience and encouragement were remarkable. When the girl stumbled, Maya didn't scold her. Instead, she knelt beside her and said, "You're doing great. Let's try again together." Watching this interaction, Charles felt a lump form in his throat. This was leadership, not based on authority or wealth, but on empathy and trust. Eventually, Maya noticed Charles lingering by the entrance. She walked over, her expression neutral but polite. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, clearly surprised to see him. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to understand," Charles admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "You talked about teaching, dance to kids, and I thought maybe seeing it for myself would help me, well, understand better." Maya studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Come on in," she invited, gesturing toward the studio. "Let me show you what we do here." Over the next hour, Charles watched as Maya worked her magic. She paired children with different skill levels, encouraging them to support each other. One boy, who seemed particularly shy, hesitated to join the group until Maya took his hand and led him onto the floor. Within minutes, he was smiling and moving alongside the others. Another child, a girl with braces on her legs, struggled to keep up with the choreography, but Maya stayed by her side, breaking down each move into manageable parts. By the end of the session, the girl beamed with pride, having mastered a simple routine. As the class wrapped up, Charles approached Maya. "How do you do it?" he asked earnestly. "How do you get them to believe in themselves like that?" Maya smiled softly. "It's not about me getting them to believe in themselves. They already have that spark inside them. My job is just to fan the flame, to remind them that they're capable of more than they think." Her words resonated deeply with Charles. He realized that he had spent years trying to shield Ethan from failure, believing it was the best way to protect him. But in doing so, he had inadvertently dimmed Ethan's flame, denying him the chance to discover his own strengths. Maya's approach was the opposite. She empowered her students, showing them that mistakes weren't failures, they were stepping stones to growth. Inspired by what he had seen, Charles began making changes in his own life. Over the next few weeks, he started loosening the tight grip he had kept on Ethan's daily routine. Instead of dictating every activity, he asked Ethan what he wanted to do. At first, Ethan seemed confused by the sudden shift, unsure of how to respond. But slowly he began expressing preferences, like wanting to visit the park more often or spend time listening to music. Each small decision brought a new level of independence, and Charles marveled at how much happier Ethan became. Evening, as they sat together watching TV, Ethan suddenly pointed toward the screen during a musical performance. His eyes lit up and he turned to Charles, making excited noises. Charles understood immediately. Ethan wanted to dance again. The memory of the restaurant flooded back, and without hesitation, Charles picked up his phone and called Maya. "Ethan wants to take dance lessons," Charles explained when she answered. "Would you consider teaching him?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a warm laugh. "Of course," Maya replied, "I'd love to." A few days later, Ethan attended his first dance lesson at the Brooklyn studio. Nervous but determined, Charles wheeled him inside, half expecting Ethan to feel out of place among the energetic crowd. But to his surprise, Ethan adapted quickly. The other kids welcomed him warmly, and Maya paired him with a teenage boy named Jamal, who also used a wheelchair. Together, they practiced simple routines, learning to synchronize their movements to the beat. By the end of the session, Ethan's cheeks were flushed with excitement, and he eagerly signed up for another class. Watching Ethan thrive in this new environment forced Charles to confront another uncomfortable truth. He had underestimated the power of inclusion. Growing up poor, he had always believed that success meant rising above his circumstances, leaving behind the struggles of his past. But now, surrounded by people who embraced diversity and celebrated individuality, Charles saw the beauty in connection. These kids didn't care about wealth or status, they cared about supporting each other and finding joy in shared experiences. Despite the positive changes, not everyone approved of Charles's transformation. Back in his elite social circle, whispers began to circulate. Friends questioned why he was spending so much time in Brooklyn, associating with commoners like Maya. Some even accused him of using charity work as a way to ease his conscience after years of neglecting his son. Charles heard these criticisms but chose to ignore them. For the first time, he didn't care about maintaining appearances or seeking approval from others. What mattered most was giving Ethan the life he deserved and learning to let go of the fears that had held them both captive for so long. As weeks turned into months, Charles continued visiting the dance studio, sometimes sitting quietly in the corner and observing, other times joining in when Maya encouraged him to participate. To his amazement, he discovered that dancing wasn't just for Ethan, it was for him too. The rhythmic movements, combined with the infectious energy of the kids, helped Charles release years of tension and regret. He found himself laughing more, connecting with people in ways he never thought possible. Through Maya's guidance, Charles learned valuable lessons about humility, vulnerability, and second chances. She challenged him to step outside his comfort zone, reminding him that true fulfillment came not from material success but from meaningful relationships. And though their worlds may have seemed vastly different, Charles realized that they shared a common goal: creating opportunities for those often overlooked by society. By the time spring rolled around, Ethan had blossomed into a confident young dancer, eager to explore new routines and push his limits. Charles, meanwhile, had transformed into a more open-minded and compassionate version of himself. Together, they embarked on a journey of discovery, one that promised to redefine their lives forever. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan's transformation became impossible to ignore. The shy, reserved boy who once hesitated to leave the safety of his home was now a bundle of energy and enthusiasm. Every day after school, he eagerly anticipated his dance lessons at the Brooklyn studio. For Ethan, the studio wasn't just a place to learn choreography, it was a sanctuary where he felt accepted, valued, and free. Charles marveled at how much his son had grown, not just physically, as his posture improved and his movements became more coordinated, but emotionally. Ethan laughed more often, made eye contact with strangers without fear, and even started attempting to communicate using gestures and facial expressions. For Charles, watching Ethan flourish was both exhilarating and humbling. He realized that Maya's influence extended far beyond teaching dance steps. She had created an environment where everyone, regardless of ability or background, could thrive. Her philosophy of empowerment resonated deeply with Charles, inspiring him to make changes not only in Ethan's life but also in his own. He began reconnecting with old friends he had drifted away from over the years, mending strained relationships by reaching out honestly and vulnerably. Some of these friendships were rocky at first. Charles had spent so long building walls around himself that breaking them down felt unnatural. But slowly, he learned to let people in again. One of the most significant shifts came when Charles decided to use his wealth and resources to support causes close to his heart. He donated a substantial portion of his fortune to programs for disabled individuals and aspiring artists like Maya. At first, this decision drew criticism from certain members of high society, who accused him of seeking redemption or trying to buy goodwill. But Charles didn't care. For the first time in his life, he understood that money wasn't meant to be hoarded. It was a tool to create opportunities and uplift others. Watching Ethan interact with kids from diverse backgrounds at the studio reinforced this belief. These children didn't judge each other based on wealth or status. They connected through shared experiences and mutual respect. Despite the progress, Charles still faced resistance, not just from outsiders but sometimes within himself. Old habits die hard, and there were moments when his protective instincts threatened to take over. Once, during a particularly challenging dance routine, Ethan struggled to keep up with the rhythm. Frustrated, he slumped in his wheelchair, refusing to continue. Charles immediately stepped forward, ready to intervene and shield his son from disappointment. But Maya gently held him back. "Let him figure it out," she whispered. "He'll get there." It took every ounce of self-control for Charles to stay put and watch as Maya knelt beside Ethan, speaking softly and encouraging him to try again. After a few minutes, Ethan nodded reluctantly and gave the routine another shot. This time, he nailed it, earning cheers from the other dancers. As Ethan grinned triumphantly, Charles felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Maya was right. Letting Ethan face challenges head-on, rather than shielding him from them, was the best way to help him grow. The backlash from Charles's peers grew louder as news of his involvement with the Brooklyn studio spread. Some accused him of abandoning his elite lifestyle, while others dismissed his efforts as a publicity stunt. One evening, during a charity gala attended by New York's wealthiest families, a snide comment from a rival businessman cut deep. "What's next, Charles?" the man sneered. "Are you going to start wearing sweatpants and teaching yoga?" Instead of reacting defensively, Charles smiled calmly. "If that's what it takes to make a difference, then maybe I will," he replied. His response silenced the room, leaving many attendees unsure of how to respond. Over time, Charles stopped caring about their opinions altogether. He found fulfillment in seeing Ethan and the other kids at the studio succeed, and that was all that mattered. Meanwhile, Maya continued to play a pivotal role in their lives. She challenged Charles to think differently about success and happiness, pushing him to embrace vulnerability instead of fearing it. During one heartfelt conversation, she shared her own struggles with self-doubt and imposter syndrome. "There are days when I wonder if I'm doing enough," she admitted. "But then I remind myself that it's not about being perfect, it's about showing up and giving your best. That's all anyone can ask for." Her honesty struck a chord with Charles, reminding him that no one has all the answers. Even someone as accomplished as Maya grappled with insecurities. Yet she persevered because she believed in the power of connection and community. Inspired by her example, Charles began volunteering at the studio, helping with administrative tasks and organizing fundraising events. Though he initially felt out of place among the lively group of volunteers, he soon realized that his contributions, no matter how small, made a difference. Ethan's confidence skyrocketed as he prepared for the studio's annual showcase, a performance featuring students of all ages and abilities. For weeks leading up to the event, rehearsals consumed their evenings. Ethan practiced tirelessly, determined to master his part in the group routine. Charles watched proudly as his son memorized complex sequences and collaborated with his fellow dancers, proving that teamwork transcended physical limitations. On the night of the showcase, the auditorium buzzed with excitement. Families filled the seats, cheering loudly as each act took the stage. When it was Ethan's turn, Charles held his breath, gripping the armrests of his chair tightly. As the music began, Ethan wheeled onto the stage, his movements fluid and confident. The audience erupted into applause, moved by the sight of a young boy in a wheelchair leading a choreographed routine alongside his peers. Tears streamed down Charles's face as he realized how far they had come together. After the performance, Ethan beamed with pride, soaking in the admiration of the crowd. Maya joined them backstage, congratulating Ethan on his incredible achievement. "You did amazing," she told him, hugging him warmly. Turning to Charles, she added, "And so did you. You trusted him, And look what happened. Charles nodded, overwhelmed with emotion. "Thank you," he said simply, knowing words couldn't fully capture how grateful he was. Maya had given him more than just a new perspective. She had shown him the importance of love, trust, and second chances. Together, they vowed to continue breaking barriers and creating opportunities for those often overlooked by society. As the night drew to a close, Charles reflected on how much his life had changed since that fateful evening at the restaurant. What began as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a journey of growth, healing, and transformation. And though challenges lay ahead, Charles knew that he and Ethan were ready to face them, together. The night of the showcase marked a turning point for Charles Whitmore and his son Ethan. The auditorium was alive with energy, the kind that comes from witnessing something truly special. Moments when barriers are broken, and humanity shines through in its purest form. As Ethan wheeled off the stage after his performance, his face glowing with pride, Charles couldn't help but feel that they had crossed a threshold together. It wasn't just about Ethan's newfound confidence or his ability to dance. It was about the realization that life is meant to be lived fully, without fear holding you back. In the weeks following the showcase, Charles became more involved than ever at the Brooklyn studio. He no longer saw himself as an outsider looking in. He was part of the community now. Maya welcomed his contributions, whether it was helping organize events, mentoring younger students, or simply being present to support Ethan and the other kids. One day, while sorting props backstage, Charles found himself laughing alongside Jamal, the teenage boy who often danced with Ethan. They joked about how hard it was to keep rhythm during fast songs, and for the first time, Charles felt like he belonged somewhere outside the polished world of boardrooms and penthouses. Ethan's progress continued to astonish everyone around him. His coordination improved dramatically, and he began experimenting with new styles of dance from hip-hop to contemporary routines. But what impressed Charles most was Ethan's growing independence. No longer content to rely on others for every decision, Ethan started expressing preferences, like choosing which outfits to wear for performances or deciding which snacks to bring to practice. These small acts of autonomy might have seemed trivial to some, but to Charles, they were monumental. Each choice Ethan made reinforced the idea that he was capable of navigating the world on his own terms. Maya noticed the changes, too. One afternoon, as she watched Ethan rehearse with a group of dancers, she pulled Charles aside. "You've done an incredible job," she said sincerely. "Not just with Ethan, but with yourself. You've grown so much since we first met." Charles smiled, though his eyes betrayed a hint of sadness. "I owe it all to you," he admitted. "If it weren't for that night at the restaurant and everything you've taught us, I don't know where we'd be right now." Maya shook her head firmly. "No, Charles, this isn't my story, it's yours. I just gave you a little push. The rest was up to you." Her words stayed with Charles long after their conversation ended. He realized that Maya had done more than guide him. She had shown him the power of trust and belief. By treating Ethan as an equal, by seeing past his wheelchair and focusing on his potential, Maya had ignited a spark in both father and son. That spark had grown into a flame, illuminating paths neither of them thought possible. As summer approached, Charles decided to take things a step further. Inspired by the success of the showcase, he proposed hosting a larger event, a gala aimed at raising funds for programs supporting disabled individuals and underprivileged artists. The idea quickly gained traction, and soon volunteers from the studio joined forces to plan the event. Ethan played a key role, designing posters and helping select music for the evening. For Charles, organizing the gala felt like coming full circle. Years ago, he would have attended such events solely to network or maintain his image. Now he poured his heart into it, knowing the impact it could have on countless lives. The night of the gala arrived, and the venue buzzed with anticipation. Guests included members of Charles's elite social circle, friends from the studio, and families whose children benefited from the programs he supported. As Charles stood at the podium to deliver a speech, he felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Looking out at the crowd, he spotted Ethan sitting proudly in the front row, surrounded by his fellow dancers. Maya stood nearby, giving him an encouraging nod. "Tonight," Charles began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat, "we celebrate not just talent, but resilience. We celebrate people who refuse to let obstacles define them. People, like my son Ethan and everyone here tonight." When I first brought Ethan to this studio, I didn't know what to expect. All I knew was that I wanted him to experience joy, to feel seen and valued. What I didn't realize was how much I needed to change, to learn to see him differently, to trust him, and to let go of my fears. He paused, glancing at Ethan, who grinned widely. "This journey has taught me that true success isn't measured by wealth or power. It's measured by the connections we make and the lives we touch. And for that lesson, I'll always be grateful, to Maya, to this incredible community, and most of all to my son." The room erupted in applause, many wiping away tears. After the speeches, the evening shifted to performances, showcasing the talents of dancers, musicians, and artists from across the city. Ethan took center stage once again, leading a powerful routine that left the audience breathless. When the final note faded, the crowd leapt to their feet, cheering wildly. Ethan raised his arms triumphantly, basking in the moment. Backstage, Charles embraced his son tightly, overcome with emotion. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "You're amazing." Ethan responded with one of his signature laughs, leaning into the hug. Nearby, Maya joined them, congratulating Ethan on another stellar performance. "You're unstoppable," she told him, ruffling his hair playfully. Later that night, as the festivities wound down, Charles found himself reflecting on how far they had come. From the isolated existence they once led to the vibrant, interconnected life they now shared. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Maya's influence had been the catalyst, but the real work had come from within, from learning to trust, to embrace vulnerability, and to believe in possibilities beyond fear. As they prepared to leave, Maya pulled Charles aside one last time. "You know," she said, her tone thoughtful, "you've already changed Ethan's life in ways you'll never fully understand. But don't stop there. Keep going. There are so many others out there who need someone to believe in them just like you believed in him." Charles nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. He glanced at Ethan, who was chatting animatedly with Jamal and another dancer, completely at ease. In that moment, Charles knew his journey was far from over. He had discovered a purpose, greater than himself, one rooted in love, connection, and service to others. Driving home that night, Charles felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead would undoubtedly have challenges, but he was ready to face them, not as the guarded billionaire he used to be, but as a father, a mentor, and a believer in second chances. Together, he and Ethan stepped into a brighter future, one defined not by wealth or status, but by the boundless potential of the human spirit.